If I asked you how best to protect nature, you'd probably say something like, leave it alone, don't drive on it, don't build on it, just let it be. And for things like ancient woodland and peat bog, that is 100% correct. The thing is, ecology hates simple rules. Imagine we abandon this lane. No more vehicle tyres, no more walkers' boots, and no more grazing animals. What would happen? Because it doesn't stay a pristine meadow. First off, tall grasses choke out delicate wildflowers, then brambles move in, hawthorn follows, and then birch and eventually oak. Over decades, lowland Britain naturally reverts to dense forest. On paper, that sounds like a win. More trees equals more wildlife, right? But what if I told you that some of Britain's rarest species don't live in the woodland? They live in open habitat like heathland, chalk grassland, and species-rich wildflower meadows. These habitats only exist because something is there to reset the clock. Naturally, that something is a wildfire or a flood. Today, it's often conservationists. If you walk onto any premium British nature reserve, you likely won't see hands-off preservation. You'll see chainsaws cutting down young trees. You'll see cattle grazing. You'll even see heavy excavators tearing up turf to expose raw soil. Hell, I've even taken part in this with things like hazel coppicing and invasive species control. To an outsider, it can look like environmental vandalism. But in ecology, we call it management through disturbance. Disturbance isn't a catastrophic disaster that nature just somehow tolerates, but it's the literal engine that keeps these habitats alive. This forces us to stop thinking in simple binaries like bare dirt bad, trees good. For thousands of years, we've shaped this island. We've got ancient trackways, we've got drovers' roads, we've got common land created that allows the very biodiversity that we have in this country today. Now, long before motorcycles, these tracks were kept open by constant use, by farmers driving their cattle down. And this opens up what I think is quite a deeply uncomfortable question for environmental scientists. If conservation actively depends on disturbance, what happens when that disturbance comes from a motorcycle tyre? Let's look at the mechanics. A motorcycle tyre is a high-energy disturbance tool. When a bike moves down a green lane, it exerts physical pressure on the ground. In the wrong place, like a wet bog or a steep clay incline after heavy rain, that pressure is destructive. It creates deep ruts, accelerates water erosion, and strips away slow-growing mosses. And this is environmental damage, plain and simple, and I'm not going to try and convince anyone otherwise. I've got to move to the shade, man. It is a hot day. But on established flat dirt or stone-based lanes, the physics change. By keeping the centre of the track bare and compacted, the tyres stop fast-growing aggressive weeds like bramble, nettle and bracken taking over. In ecology, we call these species that thrive on raw, open ground pioneer species. Many of Britain's rarest annual wildflowers and solitary bees are terrible competitors. They cannot survive in dense grass or thick woodland. They require exposed, sun-warmed soil to germinate and burrow. By constantly resetting a narrow strip of earth, a motorcycle tyre mimics the ancient hoof ploughing of wild boar or wandering livestock. It creates a microhabitat that wouldn't exist if the trail were simply left alone to overgrow. And the other thing is, tyres transport the ground as well as just clearing it. In ecology, we study something called human-mediated dispersal. For millions of years, a lot of plants relied on megafauna and herbivores to be spreading their seeds far and wide throughout a continent for them. These seeds would get stuck in their fur and they'd get stuck in their hooves. I think you can see where this is going, because today we don't have a lot of that megafauna that our biodiversity relied on to spread. But what we do have these days is a motorcycle tyre. When you ride through a damp section of lane, tiny little lightweight seeds lodge themselves into the tread and the frame mud. Studies show that while wind rarely carries seeds more than a few metres, a tyre can transport these seeds for kilometres before they dislodge. Don't get me wrong, this is a little bit of a double-edged sword, because while you can be transporting native species, you can also be doing the exact same for an invasive species. But when confined to established lanes, this mechanical vector can provide artificial gene flow, and it mixes up these plant populations that would be otherwise cut away from each other by motorways or monoculture. Because when you zoom out, you realise just how vital those connected pathways are. Look at how a green lane cuts its way through the British countryside. Much of our land is now an ecological desert. It's either sterile ryegrass for livestock or dense, dark commercial forestry. A green lane breaks up that monotony. Because it's an open channel, it brings light deep into the landscape. And you can see that just here. So here's the lane. On one side of it, it's a monoculture of corn. And on the other side, there's a monoculture of wheat. And in between all of this monoculture, we've got a thriving ecosystem here. Now, this creates what ecologists call the edge effect. So we've got the bare dirt right here, a few inches over, low growing grasses, a few inches more, higher grasses, and we've got a little bit of bramble coming in. And as you go further still, we've got willow herb. What it means is, though, in the space of, I don't know, let's say 2 meters, probably less, you've got a complete gradient from bare to biodiverse. These lanes function as wildlife corridors. They are linear nature reserves allowing insects, birds and small mammals to travel, feed and mix genetically across fractured landscapes. So the impact of green laning isn't a simple yes or no. It's a question of geography and behaviour. So when we as riders stick to the established tracks, we're actually helping an environment that thrives on this disturbance. The real ecological damage happens when you stray off the line and start creating ruts in a system that isn't actually built or used to getting over these scars. I'm in my local woodland here, and it's a prime example of how not to ride off-road. As you can see, we've got berms that have been etched out. Goes all the way round. And this track that I'm now walking that has been carved out by inconsiderate riders, I'm not going to call them bikers, this was Bluebell Meadow, and that's all of that lost now. Now, it would be easy to twist this science into a complete blanket defence of green laning, but as a scientist, I have to be completely honest about the ecological footprint that we do leave behind. Disturbance will only work if the landscape is given a little bit of time to recover, but when that scale tips from occasional use to relentless pressure, the system breaks. Take weather and soil dynamics. In the peak of winter or on high altitude peat bogs, a motorcycle tyre stops mimicking a wild boar and starts acting like an excavator. It slices through the fragile topsoil, exposing the loose earth underneath. And then when the heavy UK rain hits, water channels down these tyre tracks. Instead of absorbing into the landscape, the water shears the soil away, accelerating severe erosion. And the impact isn't just structural, it's biological. Many open habitats are home to ground nesting birds like the nightjar or the skylark. They don't perceive a motorcycle as a pioneer disturbance tool. They perceive it as an apex predator. Repeated noisy disruption during the spring nesting season can cause adults to abandon their clutches entirely. Ecology isn't interested in our labels. It doesn't care if you are a responsible rider or an eco-vandal. It only responds to raw numbers: pressure, moisture, gradient, and timing. Riding a dry, hardened stone or dirt track in July is a lot different than riding through a saturated clay track in December. They're completely different ecological events. When I started writing this video, I wanted a simple answer to a simple question. Does green laning harm nature? But the more you look at the dirt, the more that question kind of falls apart. The biggest mistake we make is treating the British countryside like a museum. We look at a landscape and think it should be frozen in time, untouched and sterile. But this island isn't a pristine wilderness, it's far from it. It's a deeply layered, living archive of human friction. Our ancient forests were managed for charcoal, our romantic heathlands were cleared by prehistoric farmers, and our green lanes were carved out by boots of medieval drovers long before engines existed. Nature on this island has always coexisted with human disturbance. In fact, it often relies on it to stay biodiverse. So a lane like this doesn't sit outside of nature, it sits smack bang in the middle of it. The real question isn't whether motorcycles belong in the countryside, it is whether we as riders possess the ecological awareness to be able to ride responsibly and in a way that nature can recover from our use. We do need to be able to respect the limits of the places that we ride. When we stick to the established track, we respect seasonal closures and we avoid fragile soils, we aren't destroying the landscape. All we're doing is adding another chapter into a very long line of human disturbance on this island that keeps it as plush and biodiverse as it is. This comes from a motorcycle tyre. Shit. Ah, fuck.